Okay. I feel horrible coming up on stage and beginning to speak because I know there's some amazing conversations going on right now. There's some really bizarre flashback moment happening over at the wall here that I got to hear part of. And I know there's some very great conversations and connections happening around the table. And I'm just going to get up here and talk about Water Street for a couple minutes, and I feel really guilty for doing that. So I apologize ahead of time. And we don't normally do this. We don't normally pause in the midst of Compelled to talk about Water Street because today is not about Water Street, other than it's about Water Street in the same way that it's about your church, in that we are all part of the body of Christ, and we are all, trying to live out this thing of expanding the kingdom, of inviting people into what God wants to do in their lives, and we want to be a part of that together. But every year at this, I get lots of questions from people. Hey, what's happening at Water Street? Hey, what's new at Water Street? What's going on at Water Street? And then we kind of regret having not taken at least 5 minutes to say what's happening at Water Street. And lately, I've been getting 2 questions. And I thought I would just kind of focus on those questions. And the one, they're basically the same question, but they're motivated out of 2 things. One is people are looking around at the world, and we won't get into all the details of it, but just looking around at the world, both locally and nationally, and they're saying, what's up with Water Street? And then people are seeing some local news about these buildings being bought, and things happening in the neighborhood, and they're like, what's up at Water Street? So I'm going to try to address both of those in just a few minutes here. So first of all, if we can, there's a slide with pictures on it. We'll go to that one first, if we can go to the slides. So yeah, Water Street's bought some buildings. And actually, if you've driven on South Queen Street recently, we've also begun digging a big hole in the ground next to one of our existing buildings. And so there's a lot happening right now with Water Street. In the upper left-hand corner here, left-hand corner, that is the old St. Joseph School on Mulberry and Vine Street in the city. It's an over 100-year-old building that was most of its life was as a Catholic school, St. Joseph School. And we purchased that a little over a year ago. And then the other 3 pictures are different views of 2 properties on South Prince Street, 121 and 131 South Prince Street. Some of you, depending on how long you've been around, would know those buildings as part of Manos, which was a juvenile drug and alcohol treatment center. Some of you may have heard of it as Scheid Funeral Home, which served the community for a number of years. And then some of you may have known that it was bought by Snyder Funeral Home and was going to be an event center in the city. And it's not going to be any of those things anymore. It's actually been purchased by Water Street, and God has given us some pretty cool vision and opportunities to make things happen in those buildings. So I wanted to show you those buildings. The other building that we're currently working on right now is our Teen Haven building on South Queen Street, 205 South Queen Street, right across from Save-A-Lot. And we've just dug a big hole next to that building because we're going to be expanding that building and expanding some of our programming and work with youth in the city. So we're super excited for that. And you can go back to the other slide. Because I want to talk a little bit about why are we buying these buildings, what's happening there. And also, I think this speaks directly into the other what's up at Water Street question, which is motivated maybe by looking around and seeing what's happening in our community around homelessness, what's happening around the country with some of the uncertainty around the future of some of our social safety net and the partners that we work with across the country, across the city, across the county. And the hopeful part of me in this moment, as I look at the rise in homelessness across the country, as I look at the rise in poverty across the country, the challenges of affordable housing, the challenges of mental health issues, drug addiction, and just those challenges that we see every day and seem to be rising, I feel hopeful because I still believe in the heart of what Water Street is all about. That we are a ministry that is called, because of the love of Christ, to walk alongside those experiencing marginalization and poverty, that they might see restoration and hope through Christ. We want to be a part of his mission. And one of the things we did a few years ago, we've launched, and this is a 3-year rolling strategic plan, so we'll just keep renewing these numbers, so it's really 24 to 27 right now. But we have launched a strategic plan, and the theme of it, to just get right down to it, is sustainable restoration. Water Street's been around for 120 years. Most people know the work that we do with people experiencing homelessness. We provide shelter. We have long-term programs to walk alongside people and hopefully see restoration happen in their lives. We also work with families in the community. We work with children and youth. The building on Mulberry Street is going to be the new home of our Wonder Academy Early Learning Center for pre-K, both K3, K4, and kindergarten kids. We have Teen Haven and Compass that works with kids from first grade through 28 years old to help them navigate life. And then we also do outreach to families in the neighborhood, and we have a medical and dental facility and behavioral health. And there's a lot of things happening, but it's really about walking alongside of people. Every one of our ministries is motivated that way. Our strategic plan was motivated by looking at what God has been doing in Water Street through all these years and saying, we are blessed to see lives changed and transformed, and we see the work of God in the lives of our guests, in the lives of families in the community, in the lives of children and youth. How do we know it's going to last? At the end of the day, obviously we're entrusting that to God. We want to walk with them as long as we can, but we know it's out of our hands. But we wanted to look at who we are and what we do, and we wanted to look at what does it look like to see that restoration be sustainable. How do we make sure that the life change that people experience is something that they can continue to move forward with and in and continue to grow stronger in their journey, in their walk with God, and in their ability to care for themselves? And so we started examining all of our programs through this lens of sustainable restoration. What does it mean to ensure the programs themselves are designed in a way that it's not just about the moment, it's not just about meeting temporary needs, it's not even about equipping them for the next week or month, but it's really about creating a pathway to sustainable restoration in their lives. For children, for youth, for families, for those experiencing homelessness. We want the programs themselves to be designed with that thought in mind. We also want to see where is it that God's calling us to maybe walk with people on that next step with them. And so there's elements that are coming out of our strategic plan that these buildings are going to help us serve. One is, as I mentioned, having our own building for Wonder Academy. Wonder Academy's operated for over 30 years, but we've always been in shared spaces, rented spaces, in churches where we don't have the ability to invite families in and build deeper relationships with the families that are involved because we've got our classrooms and we got to be out by this time because the church is using the building. To have our own space where we can open the doors and walk more deeply with those families, to provide the same kinds of services that we provide to those in our residential programs, career and financial services, budgeting, spiritual care, just walking with them on the fullness of their journey. We want to be able to do that, and that's one example of it. We're doing the same with our outreach ministries, completely renovating. So Mulberry Street is going to be the home of Wonder Academy. 121 South Prince Street is going to be the home of 2 new ministries. One is our revamped outreach ministries, which up till this point has been focused mostly on relief, care of the immediate needs of people who are in need of food. They're dealing with food instability in their homes. They may be making a decision between paying rent and what they're buying at the store this week. We're providing that relief, but we don't want to just provide relief. We believe we're called to do more than that. And so having a new facility where we can expand the work we're doing with food, but open the door to deeper relationships, to other programming that can walk alongside those families and help them identify what is the next step on my journey. How do I kind of get from here to there so that I'm not coming back to the same food pantry week after week after week for year after year, but rather can begin to take steps forward on our own. And so that's a launch. The other piece of it that I'm going to highlight quickly in my limited time is intentional communities. One of the things we've seen is as we walk with people who've experienced homelessness and all the trauma that goes along with that are navigating really complex issues in their lives, even as they've seen restoration spiritually, rebuilding like the tools to do life is a long and complicated process. And candidly, doing that in a safe, nurturing community at Water Street is awesome. But then stepping out into the real world and trying to do that again on your own is really, really complicated and hard. And so we're launching intentional communities where we're going to invite some of our guests as they finish at Water Street and they're stepping back into the world, working a job, engaging in the community, connecting with local churches. They will do that in community. 6 to 8 to 10 individuals living in community together with a level of independence where they're in like a studio apartment, but then with shared dining and doing life spaces together, where we can then come alongside with life coaches and case managers to walk with them on that journey and really provide, we're calling them intentional communities, a chance for people to kind of rebuild where they have a window of time that goes much longer than their time at Water Street. Because we believe those micro solutions and the instant solutions, when we see homelessness rising, it's like the federal policy of housing first misses a huge percentage of the people experiencing homelessness. It's the appropriate solution for some, but not for most. Definitely not for all. And so being able to walk with people. So we want to be able to collaborate and partner. We want to walk with people to help rebuild lives, not just put them in a safe place for the night. And so that's some of what's happening. That's a really quick overview. And even to do that, I went a little over my time, so I apologize. But I wanted to share, I know there's a lot of questions when you see, like, what is Water Street doing? And what is going on? I'm going to be around at the end of the day. If you would like to have that conversation, ask more. Happy to entertain any questions about what's happening at Water Street, what are the challenges we're facing, how are we looking towards the future, and what are we going to be using these buildings for? I'd love to share more details on that and just the heart of what we're doing, staying true to this concept of what it means to walk with people through some of the hardest moments of their life, but to bring the hope of Jesus and the hope of community and relationship and support into their lives. So that's it from me. And more importantly, I'm excited about this afternoon. How many of you have enjoyed the morning so far? That's wonderful. I'm going to have some clap. It doesn't feel like a clap, woot, and holler type of thing, but I'm so appreciative of Curt and just the insights and just the challenge of listening to him and thinking through these questions. And I'm so grateful for it. I believe it's going to help me understand myself and the work that God has invited me to be a part of so much better. And I hope it will do the same for you. So we're gonna shift now, and I'm gonna invite Curt back up on the stage as we start session 3. Thanks, Curt.
Well, good to see that you all came back. You know, this is the for anybody who's like speakers, lecturers, professors, whatever, preachers. This is the death knell hour, right? You've just had lunch. We could one of the elements of neuroscience that we talk an awful lot about is the mental function of memory. And we could talk for 3 days about all the research that's being done with memory. But to get right to the point, we could also just say simply, Curt's memory isn't always so sharp, which means you might remember that you got 3 but not 4 S's from me. Is that right? Yes. Okay. This was brought to my attention by a person who has great longing. And so we are people of great longing, and we are people of short memories. At least I am. So, but it's helpful. It's all part of the mysterious plan to bridge from the last movement to where we're going this afternoon. The 4th S. So we want to be seen. We want to be soothed. We want to be safe. Remember, but our safety is not just about being protected from the outside. It's about What am I doing about my own internal restraint? That is, and this is what we're doing with children all the time. We're pruning them, right? We're pruning them for the purpose of creating security. And what do we mean by security? Some would say, look, all four of these words, as my daughter, when she was in seminary, she used to say, Dad, you know, words don't have definitions, they have usage. We use them into definition. We use them. And we can, someone would say, oh, how is safe and secure different, the same? I get that. We might quibble about how we define them differently, but here's what we mean, how I'm using the word security. What we mean is that we've come to a place where I am comfortable and confident in my skin. That's what it means to be safe, to be comfortable and confident in a world that is dangerous. The world that we actually occupy is not ultimately safe if we only look at the world in the world's terms. If we look at the world in the terms of the gospel, we would say, oh, actually, the world is quite safe. But in the world's terms of it not being completely safe, we would say we can still be comfortable and confident because I have been seen, I have been soothed, I have been made to be safe. And in that safety, parents commission their children. We send our children into the world to create and curate beauty and goodness in the world. Are you with me? Now, here's the thing. You don't actually have to teach children to do this. To check my watch. Oh, there we are, 27. Okay. You don't have to teach them, because by the time your kid is about 3 to 4 years of age, they will come running into your kitchen with something that they have made, right? And they want you to put it on their refrigerator. And they want you to invite the neighbors and charge them money because they think this is Van Gogh. This is you have no idea what it is, which is kind of like looking at Van Gogh. But but this is the thing. Like, it's okay. So this is what it is. This is what they're going to. They are excited because they have made something. And you look at the first page of the Bible. He's like, oh, because this is what you're made to do. You're made to make stuff. This is what Adam and Eve were supposed to. This is the end of Genesis chapter 2. This is the story in which we live, and our children do this all the time until we train them to become anxious. Which seriously. We publicly begin to train our children around 3rd grade to become anxious in the way that we educate them. We're not trying to do this. This is not our intention, but we're training them to be anxious. And what that reminds us of is that once we're seen, soothed, safe, and secure, we're sent into the world. And this is what the first couple were intending to do. And they are an archetype for all of the creative acts that we do. What you just talked about, Jack, about what we are doing here. Look, Water Street Mission is not solving problems. It is creating icons of beauty and goodness in the world. You can tell the story that you're a problem to be solved. This is what my 42-year-old patient thought he was, right? The whole notion that someone might approach you, that Jesus sits down at your table and the first thing he says is like, oh my gosh, you are just so captivating. Like it would make us nervous, especially the dudes. Right? I mean, it would, because like we are so uncomfortable with someone who is that serious about intimacy. Someone who is that serious. Look, God takes us far more seriously than we take ourselves. He's trying to turn us into people who are going to be able to tolerate his kingdom when it gets here. This is what Dallas Willard said, like, God will let anyone into his heaven who can take it. Anyone into his heaven who can take it. Are we going to be ready for it when it gets here? Because as we know, even though we were commissioned as artists in the first 2 pages of the Bible, we know that we get to the 3rd page of the Bible. And in the story arc that we're telling, right? In what story are we living? Oh, we're in a story in which primarily we are first and foremost people of desire, infinite desire, eternal desire to create and curate beauty and goodness in the world with others who are quite different from us, vulnerably, and in the absence of shame. And then you turn the page. Now, the serpent was the craftiest of all of the creatures that the Lord God had made, the craftiest. That creature who was intent upon fooling people, that creature who was intent upon creating fools out of people, that creature that was intent upon devouring people. This is not a creature who is intended to create. This is a creature whose intention is decreation. Now, when you read that third page of the Bible, you recognize that you're coming right off that last sentence, that they were naked and they were unashamed. And you wonder, well, gosh, why is shame being named? And I just want to say, before we even get to the story that the Bible is telling, and that most of us tell about ourselves at levels that we're not even aware that we're telling, I just want us to pay attention to, like, why was shame introduced? Why is it such a big deal? And as it turns out, all you have to do, look, you don't need a shrink to tell you about what shame is. Like, everybody, like, who here hasn't felt shame, like, in the last 15 minutes, for example, right? You've done so, something's happened within the last day, within the last week, where some sense of it, we sense it. So you're like, you don't need me to, like, remind you that it's here in the world and it's active and it's doing things. But why is it such a big deal? Why did Brene Brown's book make such a big deal? Why was it that 30 years ago we had like a surge, like awareness of shame, but then it kind of like goes back into the woodwork and kind of hides out again, and so forth and so on. If you don't have to read any literature, you don't have to read the Bible. All you have to do is look around and then read the scientific literature, and there's some things we learn about shame and why it's important. Then we're going to talk about how it wields itself in the story. Is that okay? We do that? Okay. Number one, shame, before it is anything else, is a neurophysiological event. As far as our bodies, like all the parishioners in your, like when we sense it, like it is first and foremost an embodied phenomenon. It is not a thing that I first think about. By the time it reaches my thinking, oh, I feel ashamed because I did that or because that happened to me, by the time I'm thinking that, it has already been felt in my chest and my face and my hands. Are you with me? Because the body is moving far faster than your thoughts are. It's important to know that. That's number one. Number two, it begins as early as 15 to 18 months of age. It begins as a neurophysiological event that our children will begin to take in and experience long before they have language, long before they have the capacity to say, oh, this is why this is happening to me. They're going to have this phenomenon happen to them. Alan Shore, the neuropsychologist at UCLA, likes to talk about shame in terms of its neurophysiology and what happens to us as human beings in terms of a standard transmission automobile. Anybody here drive a stick shift? Yep. Okay, some of you do. Right, so you know that you have the accelerator and the brake and the clutch, right? And so we know that when we want the car to speed up, we put on the gas. We want to slow down, we use the brake. But if you don't apply the clutch when the car fully decelerates, what happens? Yeah, and does it stop gently? No, to this day, I will remember with my older brother Jim teaching me how to drive a stick shift. And the 3 different green, yellow, red light cycles that goes through while I sit in the intersection trying to find first gear with my brother, like, becoming apoplectic to my right. Like, right, you know how this works when we're learning how to do this and how, like, it is a jarring effect when that happens. Shore likes to say that, look, human beings, babies come into the world, and they are in drive, right? The accelerator is down, and they are going unless they're asleep, right? They're just going. This is our sympathetic drive system that is just going, 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 going. Sympathetic drive system, some of you heard it's like the fight or flight system. It's not just that. It's also the system that is in sympathy with us, which means if I want something, my sympathetic drive system is up and moving, my accelerator. You with me? My parasympathetic system is like the brake. It slows things down. It slows down my heart rate, slows down my breathing rate. This is what happens when I suddenly come around the corner and I find something that, like, oh, I just want to be still. I want to be quiet. I don't want it to see me. It's slowing things down. You with me? The clutch, right? So this is what happens. Parents, when you have kids that are in go mode, sometimes you have to say what to them? Stop. Or you have to say no, right? And sometimes you have to say it quickly and from across the room because you don't want them running into traffic, because this is what we will do. We find different ways as 45-year-olds to run into traffic, but this is what we will do. And someone says, stop. And here's the thing. It's not that we as parents have to teach our children to apply the brakes. It's how we do it. And the clutch, when it comes to the interpersonal interactions of the sympathetic and parasympathetic drive systems, the clutch are the relational interactions that you have with your child. And your child wants to go do something. Your child wants to bring something to you. It's a 10-year-old who comes with his 92% on his math test, which he's never gotten that good a grade in his whole life, 92%, and his dad says, where's the other 8%? Right? You feel this. There is this thing that's happening. But like the dad, if you were to interview the dad, and dad would use like, well, gosh, are you trying to be mean? Are you trying to hurt your kid's feelings? It's like, no, I'm trying to encourage him to be like, he would have a story because he's telling a story because he's anxious. But, oh my gosh, he's never gotten this. Maybe he won't get this again. I got like, right? It's like the parents that have one tool in their box. My dad had one of those. I don't know. Like I grew up in Ohio. Maybe it's an Ohio thing. OH. Yeah, okay. Any Penn State fans here? Yeah, okay. That's sweet. Oh, I shouldn't say that, should I? I just thought. Look, I grew up as an evangelical Quaker. I was like that was just not a very kind, peacemaking kind of thing to say. I get that. In Ohio. Okay. In Ohio, it was fashionable for a parent to say, you quit your crying, or I'm going to give you something to cry about. Which, of course, the sheer illogic of this. Like, even as a kid, like, I'm like, Dad, this is not making any sense to me. So we see how what can happen is that when children are doing their thing, going in go mode, can we do this? Can we do that? And then it happens, you're the pastor, and you're with your elder board. And you're saying, I'd love for us to do this. And Sam, the elder, says, I don't think that's a really great idea, Chuck. You with me? Right? Or your spouse says, or like, we are still having these things where somebody is applying the brake and there's no clutch. Are you with me? This happens dozens and dozens of times every day. And then we become so good at it that we start to do it to ourselves. Because most of the shame that I encounter in the course of my day is not coming from outside my head, it's coming from within inside my head. Because I have taken in the shame narrative that I've heard from everybody that I've heard it from. And these are not people who are trying to shame me. These are people like the dad who says, where's the other 8%, are trying to do the next right thing. But they themselves have so much shame that they need to share some of that with the world. And this is what we do. This isn't just what happens with individuals, this happens with generations. I think about what happens with those people in our culture who had generational trauma that have happened, where the message of shame that has been trickled down throughout history. Look, I'm a middle-aged white guy. There's nobody in this room that has more power than I do. I'm not even kidding. What am I doing with that? How able am I to pay attention to those who've had a very different experience from me? What does it mean for me to partner with those with whom I have great difference, especially who might be on the downside of the power gradient compared to me? Are you with me? This is what shame does. It heightens these things. And so it begins early, 15 to 18 months of age. It begins as a jarring neurophysiological event that is primarily a function of the distanced, broken interpersonal relationship between you and someone else, or between me and someone else with whom this is happening. And then it becomes a jarring interpersonal relationship within myself, in which I'm saying things to myself all day, every day. Are you with me? And I want to tell you, imagine all the moments in the course of the day where you say something like, gosh, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have been smarter, I should have done all the regret, all the thing. Now, let's pause for a second and let's just pretend for a moment that it wasn't you who was saying that, but you had your own personal attendant. You had your own personal scribe, your own personal assistant, whose job it was to say those things to you all day, every day. Like you wake up in the morning and there they are waiting for you. Gosh, you're late again. You follow me. I just want to pause you and go like, how much neurophysiological energy do you think you're burning to contain all that? Shame then has a disintegrating effect. It makes it hard for me to create. It makes it hard for me to think. It makes it hard for me to take risks. It makes it hard for me to connect with other people. It makes it hard for me to want to be intimate with you because if I have a relationship with you in which this is going to happen. I know where this is going to go, so I don't want to be connected to you. You with me? So it is disintegrating. It's very old, which means we are really well practiced at it, which means most of the things, how many here remember the day you learned to walk? If anybody raises their hand, throws off the entire lecture for the day. Right, because there are certain things that happen at a stage of life in which our memory, it's so embedded in our memory, we have no awareness that it's even happening. It's that automatic for us. And this then leads to what we call disintegrated states, which means the part of me that senses and images and feels and thinks, and the part of me that wants to create, because if you're going to create, you're going to take risks. Right? This is what it means to be secure. We're going to go out into the world and create beauty and goodness in the world because I know that if I have a safe place where I can return and be seen and soothed, I can do this forever. This is Jesus and the Holy Trinity. Forever. Do you follow me? And what evil will do is to use shame to disintegrate all of that. Not being seen, not being safe, not being soothed, you're certainly not secure. And what evil wants to do is to devour any beauty and goodness that is in the world. It is anathema to it. Evil cannot tolerate that you all are here today. And I'll tell you, it is knocking at the door. How many of us are sitting here already and you're all, like we are still holding the things that we are anxious about that we're not addressing with those emails and the texts and the this and the that? How many of us have parishioners that are in trouble? How many of us have all these things that are really going on in your real life, not in here because this isn't real, in your real life that you're, like, evil is trying to have you pay more attention to that than you are paying attention to what God wants to do with you right here and now in the room. Are you with me? And remember, how are we then going to go and do our work expecting people to do the things that we want the gospel to do for them if it's this hard for us to do? Because we need people who are taking care of us. We need people who can come and say, I want to make sure that you're seen, soothed, safe, in order for you to be secure enough to go do the things that you long to do, to create the beauty and goodness that you're creating in the world. But shame will be nipping at our heels. It is disintegrating. Its primary narrative is one of some version of you're not enough, you're not worth it, you're inadequate, you're insufficient, you're inferior, some version of that language. But remember, the language always comes after the felt sense in the body. Which is why just telling someone not to be ashamed is not very helpful. You know, it's like, you know, the old ads, just say no to drugs. You remember those ads? People in this room are old enough to remember those ads. Here's the challenge. The part of the brain that hears the words, just say no to drugs, have got nothing to do with the part of the brain that wants to do the drugs. The part of the brain that hears the words, you don't need to be ashamed of that, has very little to do with the part of the brain that is running the machine that has you feeling ashamed. The only way I'm going to sense it is if something embodied happens to me. And so that's the narrative. And the ultimate, consummate sense of what shame is leading to is what we would call catastrophic abandonment. The felt sense that I'm not enough and therefore you're going to leave. You're going to go. You're going to leave me in some way, shape, or form. You're going to leave my marriage. You're going to leave our houses. You're going to leave us behind as a family. You're going to leave you're not going to fund us anymore. All the things that we like, somebody's going to go because they've seen me for who I am. When I become vulnerable, when I become naked, when I am seen for who I am, you're going to see it. And instead of linking with me and creating beauty and goodness in the world, you're going to go. Are you with me? Remember, it's not good for the man to be alone, right? It's echoing. And these are some of the things that are happening in this space when the serpent shows up. And we come to find that the serpent starts to ask a question. And I want to invite us to go. So here's a test question for all the ministers. I wonder if they asked you these things on, like, anybody here go to seminary? Oh, yeah, so you've gone to seminary. I wonder if there was like, well, to get your seminary degree, you have to answer this question correctly. When exactly did the sin happen in the Garden of Eden? And they're going to give you 5 choices. Did it happen when she looked at the fruit? Did it happen when she took a step closer to the tree? Did it happen when she reached for the fruit? Did it happen when she took the fruit? Did it happen when she put her mouth on the fruit? Did it happen when she bit into the fruit? Did it happen when she chewed? You get it. When did it happen? We would love to know what the answer to that is, because I need to know that I know where the line is so that I don't piss God off and have him do to me what he did to Adam and Eve. Are you with me? Okay? And I want to invite you to consider, it's not a helpful question to begin with. I want you to consider the following, that shame, and we like to talk about like, oh yeah, they ate the fruit and then they discovered that they were naked and all the things, all the downstream stuff that happens. You get to Genesis 4 and all the, like, Cain kills Abel because Abel's not able to kill Cain, and all the things you learn when you're like in fourth grade to remember who killed who, all those things, all the violence that comes, right, which is different than Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, where God hovers to create. And shame is about violence, right? The car does not just stop easily. The car stops violently. That 10-year-old boy who hears, where's the other 8%? Dad's not slapping him on the face. He's not yelling at him. And inside that boy, he crumples. So by the time he's 18, he's going to be a 5-star athlete. He's going to be a straight A student, and he will believe he is not enough of a son because he is still looking for the 8%. And I will guarantee you, there are people in the room who are that boy, who've grown into 30 and 40 and 50 and 60-year-old adults who are still looking for the 8%. That's the story that we tell. We, like our friend, our 42-year-old patient, we grew up in a loving Christian home. That's the story that comes out of our mouth, but that's not the story that my body is living. And so we get to this story, and the serpent starts a conversation. Is it true that God said you may not eat of any tree of the garden? Is it true? And I want to invite you to consider that shame begins with the opening statement. Because what the serpent is doing is shaming the woman from the very beginning in how the serpent is having the conversation. I have a patient who, when I first saw her, was in her 40s, who, when she was in college as a 19-year-old, got a phone call from her father who said, I'm leaving your mother. This person grew up in Northern Virginia. I'm leaving your mother, and I'm moving to Seattle, where I have another family. Now, this happened 40 years ago, right? There was no technology. There was, nobody's going to know. No, people in Northern Virginia, they barely know there is a thing called Seattle, let alone know somebody there, let alone social media, let alone be aware of all the things you can be aware of. And no, they don't know. But her dad, who was a businessman who would travel to the West Coast frequently, as it turns out, had 2 children with another woman. And then he says to her, she's 19, then he says to her, but you need to know it's not your fault. And of course, he's trying to comfort her, and her question is well, goodness, you have the capacity to choose somebody else other than me. How could it not be my fault? How is it that why am I not enough to keep you here? Are you with me? Right? And these are the questions that we're asking. So it's important for us to know that when the serpent starts to talk to the woman in the way that he does, the serpent is talking with the woman about God, right? As many people have observed, right? It's the first effort of theology, right? It's the first endeavor into theology, where we're going to talk about God. The serpent does not say to the woman, hey, I have a question for you, and I want to wait for God to come around at the end of the day so the 4 of us can chat. We're all about talking about God, but talking with someone else feels dangerous. And at the end of the day, what he's really saying is, God doesn't let you have it, not just because God's a mean God, but because you're not actually worth it. Notice, you don't read this in the text because this is how brilliant evil... Look, evil is the second smartest force on the planet. I know I'm not the smartest, the second smartest, the third. It's very smart. And what evil wants her to do is to draw the conclusion that she can. There's something not right about me. It's not just about what God won't let me do. And I want to invite us to consider that what's happening in that conversation is that shame is already decreating, deconstructing her relationship, not just with God, but within herself, along with her husband, who apparently saw fit to say nothing. This is the other thing that shame does, right? You've been in a room where you're noticing that somebody is being publicly embarrassed. How many of us are like, oh, wait a minute, I'd like to step into the fray here and have a conversation? No, somebody, like, we watch shame start to ripple through a group, and everybody just goes dark. Everybody just gets silent. You've been in those places, right? Somebody says something that people find to be embarrassing. We all just kind of like look down at our tables where we're taking notes in the elder board meeting. Because it is that socially powerful because of what happens with our minds, with our brains in the room. And so what does it do? It leads one thing to another, and now, like, the fruit actually becomes a really helpful way to cope with what's happening. It's not just an act of disobedience, it is a coping strategy. This is what our addictions are. Our addictions are ways for us to cope with all of our unrepaired ruptures. It's not just, I'm an addict, it's, I'm an addict and I have acres of unrepaired ruptures that I don't know about. Many of us don't know about here in this, because we have, like, in where we live, like, we've got so many accessories to keep me, like, unaware of me. Are you with me? And because of that, I have no idea about the things that I'm doing where shame lives in my house. Unless I'm going to be open to allowing someone else to give me the opportunity to be seen, soothed, safe, and secure. There's one verse on your table that reminds us that there are those who believe they know things who do not know as they ought, but the person who loves God is known by God. Notice it does not say, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 2 and 3. This is Paul, his letter to Corinthians. This is not Paul saying, like, the person who loves God knows God. Not that that's not true, but the person who loves God is known by God. Here's the thing. We like to say, look, the human being does not ultimately know that something is true until I feel it in my chest. You can give me all the academic downloading theology you want, and if I don't feel it here, it's not yet fully true for me. For me to love God means I'm going to love someone by whom I have been seen fully, soothed, made to be comfortable and confident, and commissioned to do hard things, creating beauty and goodness in the wilderness. But I can love him because he has seen the worst parts of me, the parts that I don't want anybody to see, and he has not left the room. Who is seeing all the parts of you and not leaving the room? This is what Good Friday is. Jesus comes and says, I'm seeing everything. You give it to me, and I will not leave the room. But if I don't have somebody coming to me and saying, Curt, I see all this stuff because you're allowing me to see it, and we aren't leaving the room, it's only then that I sense that I'm loved. Are you with me? It's only then that I push shame to the border. If I don't have embodied creatures, that would be other human beings, in my life with whom this is happening, it will be very hard for me to have the energy to do my ministerial work. It will be very difficult for me to give people what I don't have. But moreover, if this is what I do have, it will be far easier for me to be present with people when I recognize that mostly what they need is not all the solutions that I can bring to their problems, all the diagnoses I can make of their symptoms, that mostly what they need is me being present with them. All of the solutions follow. But at the end of the day, because nobody gets out alive, mostly what I'm looking for when I die, I'm going to be looking for my king, looking for me. Knowing that, like, the death isn't going to stop. It's coming for me. But I'm not going to be worried about it, not because I can fix it, not because I can solve it, not because I can come up with some kind of AI vision for extending me for the next 300 years, but because somebody's coming to find me. Now, all this to say that we are people of great grief. And shame is the way that evil wields its trauma-inducing behavior to shatter us, to shatter our stories, and to shatter our storytelling mechanism. Because mostly how I'm going to respond to this grief in all of its forms, grief, it's a placeholder for my rage, my sadness, my shame, my everything. Mostly, what we want to do is name that we are people of grief in order for us to get to the next part of our time, which is becoming people of hope. But I can't name that if I haven't yet named my griefs. And everybody in this room has them. And if I'm burning energy just trying to cope with them, it'll be very difficult for me to get on with the business that I've been called to do, to create beauty and goodness in the world, like what Water Street's trying to do. This notion of being loved because I'm known by God is a big deal, which is why that verse is on your table. By whom are you being deeply known, such that your unrepaired ruptures may come into the room so that others may see them and remain until they are healed, so that you can be recommissioned. I have some questions for you. What griefs are you carrying? What griefs are you carrying? How is shame playing a role in your story? Question number 2. How is shame playing a role in your story? Notice, shame mostly plays a role in very, very micro moments. 3. If you could not be ashamed or afraid, if it weren't possible, what new thing would you sense that God is calling you to co-create with him? Is it a new relationship? Is it a new business endeavor? Is it a repair of a broken relationship? Is it a new ministry? Is it a new commitment to simple life? Is it a commitment to extending our outreach to those who are the least and the lost and the left? What would we do if we could not be ashamed in the way that evil tries to wield it? And I think with those 3 questions, we'll go to our next time of conversation.
Thank you so much, Curt. So we're going to head right back out to our rooms and spend some time together once again and engage around those questions. Facilitators, there's not a long break after this one. We are going to come back to the room right after this session. So just a reminder there, and we'll see you back here in a little bit.